I'm going to talk today a little bit about how we affect other people in ways that we don't even realize. When we show up in somebody's life, we have no true knowledge of the impact we have on their lives. I'll illustrate this with a story from my own life. I used to work for a university in a past lifetime, and I was in charge of all their musical instruments. And it was Christmas break, it was winter break, so there was hardly anyone around, none of the professors were there, and I was getting ready for the next semester. And a young man came to my office door, and he was very nervous and kind of agitated, and he said, administration had sent him here for counseling. Well, I knew he was in the wrong office, so I asked him a little bit more about what he was up to and invited him in and gave him a cup of coffee. And he was a new student on campus, and he needed academic advisement. So I made a couple of phone calls to find somebody on campus that could actually give him the information he needed, and I sent him up to see the associate dean. And while I was gone, I looked at I said, leave your saxophone here and I'll take a look at it while you're gone. And I started going through it, and it was a mess. Every pad in it leaked. I don't see how he could ever play it. And over the years, I've come to know that this is kind of like our lives too. We get used to the way things are. I've worked with a lot of professional musicians, and I look at their instruments and I go, how can you make beautiful music out of this piece of whatever? And so I spent a couple of hours repairing his instrument. And he came back, and I gave it to him, and he asked me, how much? So it's free, part of the service, and he was blown away. I don't think he came from a culture where people were very nice to him. And so he kind of adopted me, and he had a real difficult time at the university. He came from the neighborhood and from the streets, basically. And he really wanted a college degree. It would make him feel good about himself. So over the course of the years, he would poke his head in my door and see if I was up to anything. And if I was alone, he would come in and we would talk. If anyone was in there, he would never come in. And we'd just chat. I'd talk to him about my life and how things were going. And for people that know, my daughter had cancer, so we talked about the process of cancer and dying, and just, you know, to me, nothing profound. And as often happens, he stopped coming in. He left the university. Happens all the time. I didn't think much of it. But about a year later, he came back into my office and said to me, he always called me bro, and I always appreciated that. He goes, bro, when I got back on campus, you were the first person I had to come and see. Turns out that when he came to see me the first time, he was on drugs. He was an alcoholic. And when he left the university, he had AIDS. And he had gone into the hospital, and the doctors had told him, you know, prepare, you're probably not going to make it, you're probably going to die. And when he came back and talked to me, he said, when I was lying there in the hospital bed, thinking that I was going to die, I just kept remembering what you told me. Now, I was blown away. I have no clue what I told him. None at all. I don't know. It was just chit-chat to me, but it was very meaningful to him. He took some meaning out of what I said. And I thought about this for a long time. And what I came up with is, it's not really the words. Our words really don't matter. It's the content of our hearts that matter. It's the energy on which you meet and talk with people that matters. It's being in connection with someone else that matters. this is illustrated in another way too. Just recently, I was actually at a Toastmaster meeting, and a woman came up to me afterwards and says, "I know what you do for a living, and I'm a volunteer at an animal shelter. And a friend of mine is in hospice now, and I'd like to call her, but I don't know what to say." And I suggested to her, call her and tell her that. "I don't know what to say. How can I support you? I'd like to visit if it's all right with you." And she did that. And she went and visited this woman in the hospice, and she brought one of the rescue dogs with her. The dog jumped up in the bed with the woman, and she said they had a several-hour conversation, and they laughed and talked about the future of the Animal Rescue Center and their future and her future. She's going back to school. And she said it was a wonderful experience, and she thanked me so much for giving her the courage to call somebody and say, "I don't know what to say." 3 days after her visit, the woman passed away. And she was so grateful that she had the opportunity to bring closure to that relationship, and in the last few days of that woman's life, bring her some joy while she was going through her transition period. In our lives, we meet many people, and we connect with them in ways that we have no idea. And so in my life, I try the best I can, and I suggest to everyone else, don't worry about the words. If you don't know what to say to somebody, you say, "I don't know what to say." And that's a great icebreaker. And it's not the words we use, but it's the content of our hearts and the connection one person to another that makes the difference.